Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov has told the US network NBC that there are no plans for Russian President Vladimir Putin to meet with Ukrainian President Vololdymyr Zelenskyy. He told NBC's Meet the Press in a taped interview that Putin will be ready, quote, when the agenda is ready. This comes as Zelenskyy says Russia is doing everything it can to prevent him from meeting Putin face-to-face. Moscow has repeatedly said conditions for such talks have not been met. Zelenskyy was speaking during a visit to Kyiv by NATO chief Mark Rutte to discuss future security guarantees for Ukraine.
On Friday, President Trump said he'll make a very important decision on the Ukraine war in 2 weeks.
And that's whether or not it's massive sanctions or massive tariffs or both. Or do we do nothing and say it's your fight?
Many would surely like to know now. Trump also shared a memento of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
That's a man named Vladimir Putin, who I believe will be coming, depending on what happens.
Meanwhile, in Kyiv, NATO chief Mark Rutte met Ukrainian President Vololdymyr Zelenskyy to discuss possible future security guarantees for Ukraine. These have been front and center in talks among European leaders this week, after Trump said Putin had agreed to them and to meet the Ukrainian president.
Robust security guarantees will be essential, and this is what we are now working to define. So that when the time comes, for you to enter that bilateral meeting, you have the unmistakable force of Ukraine's friends behind you, ensuring that Russia will uphold any deal and will never ever again attempt to take 1 square kilometer of Ukraine.
But Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov raised doubt about the idea, stating that discussing security guarantees without Russia was a road to nowhere, and that Russia couldn't accept European forces on the ground. He added that no meeting was planned between Putin and Zelenskyy. While hosting Rutte in Kyiv, Zelenskyy didn't seem to have changed his view on his enemy.
I think a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, Russia was in the same place it is now. It doesn't want to end the war. It wants to use ultimatums to block any possibility of ending the war. They do everything to ensure President Trump does not impose sanctions on them. They act so that the United States does not apply the full pressure it can. This is what Russia is doing.
This week saw one of the heaviest Russian strikes on Ukraine in weeks, with more than 500 drones and dozens of missiles targeting various parts of the country. And for months, Russian forces have made slow but steady gains across the front line in Ukraine.
Let's bring in Niklas Balbon. He is a research fellow with the Global Public Policy Institute here in Berlin. Niklas, great to have you on DW News this morning. So Russia's demanding territorial concessions. There's been no let-up in the Russian drone attacks. So in your opinion, does it even make sense for Putin and Zelenskyy to meet?
Good morning. I think the fact that we're not really seeing progress on this is quite indicative of the chances that a meeting would have at this point of time. You know, even the first step, which would be a ceasefire, for this step, the positions of Ukraine and Russia, they're just so far apart from each other. Ukraine has offered Russia for a long time now an unconditional ceasefire. Russia, on the other side, they say that for a ceasefire to happen, there must be major concessions in terms of security guarantees and membership of Ukraine in NATO, and basically the whole European security architecture. And so for a meeting to happen, it is very unlikely, because these positions are so far apart, that common ground can be found immediately, which makes it risky for the Ukrainian side to agree to such a meeting, because there's always the risk that in the event of nothing really being agreed on, that Trump might turn his back again on Ukraine because he blames Ukraine for it. And the Russians just don't need to, because they're playing for time. And so it feeds into their logic.
Now, let's bring in NATO here, because on his visit to Kyiv on Friday, the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, said Ukraine needs robust security guarantees. So what would that actually look like, though?
I'm sure that in Kyiv they discussed multiple options, and I would interpret robust more as a talking point here, to signal that NATO is ready for Ukraine if there was ever an agreement on security guarantees to be part of it. Obviously, from a Ukrainian perspective, the best kind of security guarantees would entail NATO troops on Ukrainian territory, but that is precisely what Russia wants to avoid. They have stated this deliberately and made it very clear that they do not want NATO troops on Ukrainian soil, because they know that it's the best scenario for Ukraine. And I think that's something that Mark Rutte, he might have discussed yesterday, but at the end of the day, he's not really in the driving seat, because it's not even clear that NATO might be part of any kind of security guarantees.
Well, let's bring in the United States here, because President Trump has given Putin a 2-week deadline to meet with Zelensky. How effective do you see this deadline that he's given?
Not really effective, because we have seen many deadlines before. We have seen Trump being upset and giving deadlines and then not following through. And I think the meeting last week in Alaska, it showed us that Trump is a bit more sympathetic towards Putin's position than we had previously hoped. And I think it's also important here to keep in mind the bigger strategic picture. You know, it's a war of attrition, and no side is capable to do a major military breakthrough. And so the only way for them to end this situation is through negotiations or by making a bet on the other side collapsing. Right. And for Russia, the situation is that they can make that bet because Trump never follows through on anything that would make it more likely for Russia to collapse.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Niklas, but great to have your insights this morning. Niklas Balbon from the Global Public Policy Institute here in Berlin. Thank you.